Welcome to Cruise News, your daily update on everything happening at sea. Visit cruisenews.io to see today's stories and sign up for email alerts.
So today we have a really fascinating stack of sources to dive into.
We definitely do.
And we're looking at a theme that is fundamentally reshaping the maritime landscape.
Yeah.
Today is all about what cruising access looks like in 2026 and beyond.
Right, and it is arguably the defining conversation of the industry right now. We are observing this notable structural shift in how and, well, more importantly, where we actually access the water. The cruise lines are actively recalculating the value of where they deploy their assets.
Yeah, and we have a lineup today that illustrates this shift perfectly. Because on one hand, we're watching everyday local cruise experiences vanish from a major American city.
It's just tough to see.
It is. But then on the flip side, we're seeing ships execute these ultra-rare port calls on some of the most remote islands on the planet, while also sustaining bucket list itineraries in pristine natural environments. These stories might seem disconnected at first glance, but they aren't just random scheduling quirks. They demonstrate how operators are abandoning certain traditional models, like the standalone city harbor tour, while pushing the absolute geographical boundaries of others.
Let's start with that loss of local access, because the reality of this economic shift is hitting Baltimore right now. City Cruises announced they are completely ending their Baltimore dinner, brunch, and sightseeing operations by the spring of 2026.
Which is a substantial blow to the identity of that local waterfront. We aren't talking about a seasonal reduction in service here.
No, not at all.
This is a total exit from that specific local market by a major commercial operator.
And the timeline is moving quickly, too. In March of 2026, their primary ship, the Spirit of Baltimore.
The one they just renovated.
Exactly. They renovated it back in 2021, so they invested heavily in this vessel recently, only to pull it from the city. It's going to be relocated entirely to a port in Washington, D.C. They will keep a second vessel, the Majesty, running local sailings just to finish out their published schedule. But after April 25th, 2026, that is it, the final day of operations.
What's fascinating here is the sheer scale of the consolidation strategy being deployed by the parent company, Hornblower Group.
Yeah, they're massive.
They are. To understand why a renovated ship is abruptly leaving a major city, you really have to look at Hornblower's broader footprint. They own more than 80 boats. They operate across 10 different countries and in more than 50 U.S. cities. They are a dominant operator in this space.
Definitely.
And they already operate 10 ships just down the road in Washington, D.C., offering everything from water taxis to live music events and dedicated dinner cruises.
But doesn't a move like that risk alienating a deeply loyal local customer base? I mean, people in Baltimore have been celebrating anniversaries and birthdays on those boats for years.
They have.
Is the corporate mindset just that the margins in D.C. are so high they can afford to walk away from a dedicated local market?
That is exactly the calculation being made. If we connect this to the bigger picture, it tells us something critical about the changing economics of tourism. Waterfront tour operators are increasingly abandoning these smaller, localized harbors in favor of proven, stronger megamarkets.
It's just a numbers game.
Completely. The economics of running a standalone dinner cruise in a city like Baltimore are getting much tougher when you can just consolidate your fleet in a massive hub like D.C. In a megamarket, the sheer volume of international tourists, combined with lucrative corporate buyout events, provides a daily financial guarantee that smaller cities simply cannot match.
The company did release a statement addressing the exit, calling it a strategic decision to position the business for a sustainable future.
Right.
They also made a point to say the choice wasn't made lightly, emphasizing that people are the heart of their business. But, corporate phrasing aside, the ships are still leaving.
Yeah, sustainable future in corporate terms almost always means trimming operations that don't meet the highest margin thresholds and doubling down on the undeniable profit centers.
Which brings up a question for you, listening right now, considering the ripple effects. What does a city like Baltimore do to draw visitors to the Inner Harbor when these signature floating experiences vanish?
It's a huge challenge.
When you think about it, if you live in or visit Baltimore, what do you do now on a random Tuesday when you want to get on the water? It fundamentally changes how residents and tourists interact with their own geography.
It creates a vacuum. It forces city planners and local tourism boards to entirely rethink the identity of their waterfronts. If the commercial maritime operators are packing up for the next city over, the harbor risks becoming just a backdrop rather than an active, accessible destination.
So while local urban access is shrinking because of these harsh economics, we're actually seeing the exact opposite happening in the wilderness. Let's look at a major milestone for Holland America Line because they are proving how sustained access to pristine nature requires a very specific long-term strategy. Their ship, the Noordam, just turned 20 years old. It was delivered on January 31st, 2006, and was officially christened in New York City on February 22nd of that year by the actress Marlee Matlin.
Reaching 20 years in service is a notable milestone, especially right now. The broader industry is currently obsessed with building the next record-breaking, multi-billion-dollar megaship.
Always bigger.
Always. So keeping a two-decade-old vessel not just operational, but highly prioritized, says a lot about its unique value.
Okay, let's unpack this because the Noordam is a compelling vessel for a few reasons. It was built by Fincantieri, which is a major Italian shipbuilding company responsible for a huge portion of the global cruise fleet.
Right.
It's part of Holland America's Vista-class series. And I found this piece of trivia fascinating. It is actually the fourth Holland America vessel to bear the legacy Noordam name, a lineage that dates all the way back to 1908.
That century of historical continuity is a great touch.
Yeah.
But the most important detail you mentioned is the class of the ship.
The Vista-class.
Exactly. When we talk about a Vista-class vessel, we're talking about a design philosophy heavily focused on outward-facing architecture. Lots of glass, ocean view staterooms, and dedicated observation lounges. Furthermore, it carries about 1,900 guests.
Which isn't huge.
No, by current industry standards, where ships frequently carry upwards of 5,000 to 7,000 passengers, a 1,900-passenger ship is firmly considered mid-sized.
But Holland America is clearly betting that these mid-size vessels are exactly what the market needs for scenery-driven cruising. They haven't just let this ship age out or fall into disrepair.
Not at all. They've invested heavily to ensure it stays relevant. It underwent an extensive refurbishment in 2019 and then received another substantial update just recently in 2024.
Oh, wow. So very recently.
Yes, they upgraded the furnishings, modernized the bathrooms, and overhauled the common areas. They're ensuring a 20-year-old ship feels contemporary because, for certain routes, a smaller footprint is an absolute necessity.
Let's talk about those specific routes, because the 2026 itinerary is the perfect example of sustained environmental access. Right now, the Noordam is running 14-night cruises around Australia and New Zealand. But in April 2026, it is scheduled to do a repositioning voyage to Seattle.
Yep.
And just to clarify for anyone who doesn't track cruise logistics, a repositioning voyage is essentially when a ship needs to move to an entirely new region for the upcoming season, and instead of sailing empty, the line sells it as a unique point-to-point itinerary.
Right. It's a functional move that doubles as a distinct travel opportunity.
Exactly. Then, on June 7th, 2026, it departs on a massive 28-day legendary Alaska Arctic Circle solstice voyage, which, by the way, has advertised fares starting at just $104 per night.
That's remarkable.
When you consider that a standard hotel room in a generic suburban town often costs more than that and doesn't include meals or transportation through the Arctic Circle, the value proposition is striking. After that season wraps up in mid-October of 2026, it heads back to Australia and New Zealand, taking a route right through Hawaii.
The Alaska deployment is really where the ship's size proves its worth and why Holland America keeps it so well maintained. Mid-size ships are the ideal hardware for Alaska's geography.
How so?
When a captain is navigating tight fjords, dealing with unpredictable ice, and trying to get deep into highly protected areas like Glacier Bay National Park, they simply cannot do that safely or legally on a modern megaship.
Right, there are strict environmental and size regulations in those protected waters.
Precisely. The Noordam is actually one of 6 ships Holland America is assigning to the Alaska market to maintain this level of access, running alongside the Eurodam, the Koningsdam, the New Amsterdam, the Westerdam, and the Zaandam.
Having that specific fleet means you can offer an entirely different level of environmental immersion. When you're sailing through Glacier Bay, you want those dedicated viewing spaces we talked about with the Vista-class design.
Absolutely.
The Noordam features signature spaces like the Crow's Nest Lounge, which is an elevated, forward-facing observation area designed specifically for this exact type of landscape access. You aren't just on a floating amusement park, you're on a vessel built to let the outside in.
It is a sharp contrast with our first story. While operators might be pulling out of everyday city harbors due to shifting economics, the industry is aggressively maintaining access to these vast, highly protected natural environments, keeping vessels perfectly sized for the job and the fleet.
Which brings us to our final look at access today. Here's where it gets really interesting. We are moving from sustained natural access in Alaska to absolute extreme geographical access in the South Pacific. Another Holland America ship, the Volendam, which was built in 1999, making it even older than the Noordam, is currently sailing a 133-day Grand World Voyage.
A massive undertaking.
We're talking about 51 destinations across 23 countries and 5 continents. And on day 46 of this journey, they made an exceptionally rare call at Pitcairn Island.
Pitcairn Island is essentially the definition of extreme isolation. To give you some geographical context, it sits about 1,350 miles east-southeast of Tahiti. It's the only inhabited island in a group of 4 volcanic islands, and it has a total population of just 38 residents.
38 people. That is fewer people than you'd find in an average high school classroom occupying an entire remote island.
Yes.
And because the island is so isolated, there is absolutely no infrastructure for a typical passenger landing. A cruise ship can't just drop a gangway and have hundreds of guests wander into town, so they had to flip the script entirely. Because the passengers couldn't go ashore, the community came to the ship.
It was an ingenious logistical solution organized as an on-board cultural exchange. A delegation of 28 residents boarded the ship led by the local mayor. That means well over half the island's entire population was standing on the deck of the Volendam.
They turned the ship into a pop-up marketplace. The island families brought handcrafted items they had made, and guests had this highly unique opportunity to buy goods directly from the local community. Imagine being on a luxury cruise, hundreds of miles from the nearest major landmass, and suddenly you're chatting with the mayor of an island of 38 people buying local crafts in the middle of the ocean.
But we have to look at the other side of this transaction. It wasn't just a fascinating novelty for the passengers, it was a critical lifeline for the island itself. Pitcairn only receives supply ships about 4 times a year. Let that sink in. They have to plan their entire existence around 4 localized deliveries annually.
That leaves zero room for error with perishables.
Exactly. So the Volendam's hotel general manager, Florin Dragomir, coordinated a substantial donation of fresh provisions. They worked with the island's leadership to offload fresh milk, meat, and eggs. The cruise ship literally acted as a vital supply chain intervention for this community.
There was a great formal moment to mark the occasion, too. Captain Rens van Aerten exchanged commemorative plaques with the mayor. And while the passengers stayed on board, a very small group of the Volendam crew actually got to go ashore.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. They took the opportunity to observe the island firsthand so they could report back to the guests and their fellow crew members about what day-to-day life is actually like in one of the most remote settlements on Earth.
It highlights how these vessels are pushing further out, operating as self-contained ecosystems that can temporarily sustain these isolated places. But on that exact same voyage, the Volendam provided a completely different kind of access, demonstrating how cruise ships act as formidable economic engines for major emerging hubs.
The operational divide here is striking. Earlier on, this exact same 133-day voyage, back on January 15th, the Volendam arrived in Recife, Brazil. And they weren't just passing through. Their arrival officially opened the 2026 cruise season for the entire port. The ship brought more than 900 guests into the city, and the local welcome was phenomenal. They were greeted with a massive handicraft fair, local beverage tastings, and traditional frevo music. For anyone unfamiliar, frevo is this incredibly fast-paced, brass-heavy, traditional Brazilian rhythm associated with the Pernambuco region, often danced with small umbrellas. It's a highly energetic welcome.
The scale of the economic impact is what we need to focus on here. From an island of 38 people to a bustling South American port city. The managing director of the Recife Port, Paulo Neri, shared data outlining what this access means economically. He noted that the port has already seen 7,000 visitors this season, between guests and crew members.
Wow.
And they are projecting over 20,000 visitors in total for the 2026 season.
That is a wave of foot traffic for local businesses, and it's a truly international lineup of ships delivering those people. Recife is hosting calls from Silver Sea, Costa Cruises, Viking, and Pinot Cruises. Plus, they are expecting 10 more ships before the season ends in April. We're talking about major vessels like the Adamar, Phoenix Raisins Artenia, and the Seven Seas Splendor.
As Paulinari pointed out, all this scheduled activity has a direct, measurable impact. It fuels their local economy, drives tourism revenue, creates temporary and permanent jobs, and raises the overall global visibility of the state. The port is actively investing in preparations to receive these vessels efficiently, because the economic access the cruise lines provide is transformative for the city's bottom line.
So, what does this all mean? We have looked at Baltimore losing its everyday dinner cruises to a larger mega market, the Noordam bringing guests deep into the highly regulated Alaskan wilderness, and the Volendam simultaneously resupplying a 38-person island and pouring thousands of tourists into the Brazilian economy.
This raises an important question about the fundamental nature of the industry in 2026. The cruise lines are acting as critical supply lifelines to the most isolated places on Earth, like Pitcairn, while operating as powerful economic engines for booming ports like Recife. It proves that as these fleets push their itineraries further out to the absolute edges of the map, they are actively reshaping the local economies they interact with.
It's a profound shift in how we view these vessels. The footprint of a cruise ship isn't just about where passengers want to take a vacation anymore. It's about the broader, tangible impact that vessel has on the harbor it docks in, or in the case of Baltimore, the harbor it leaves behind.
And I want to leave you with a final thought on the evolving nature of this access. We've talked about how cruise lines are effectively resupplying remote islands while pulling out of traditional commercial harbors. It makes you wonder, as these massive self-sustaining ships become the most reliable way to reach and supply the extreme edges of the map, are cruise lines quietly evolving from simple hospitality providers into essential quasi-governments or critical maritime infrastructure for the world's most isolated communities? In the future, a remote island's survival might depend less on traditional national trade routes and more on the scheduled itinerary of a luxury world cruise. It is certainly something for you to ponder before you book your next ticket.
Thanks for listening to Cruise News. Visit cruisenews.io to catch up on the latest updates and sign up for free email alerts.